In this episode, as promised, I will dive deeper into the energetics around signs and synchronicities. I share how our ego can get in the way when it comes to trusting our intuition as to what these signs might mean. I also dive deeper into the energetics behind how to ask for them, as well as how some of our actions, like relying on them too much for validation or constantly looking for signs, can actually stop them from showing up. I also wanted to share some of my signs and synchronicity stories that I've experienced in the past, as they highlight a few things that I'll be talking about today. My intention behind sharing my stories is to highlight the funny and uncanny ways in which messages from the universe can show up, but also how we can all fall into the patterns of questioning and doubting ourselves and our intuition, no matter where we're at in our journey. It's completely normal to succumb to our ego mind from time to time, and I really like to look back and laugh at myself at these moments of ridiculousness or, when I've fallen into those familiar warring thoughts of the ego mind. Sharing these stories with you all also helps me to surrender to my fears and to feeling vulnerable by opening up and sharing more of myself and my serendipitous stories on this podcast. Ultimately, these experiences have reminded me to just simply acknowledge the ego's fears and doubts and to just surrender to my intuition and what the universe is always showing me. So as we're heading into the new astrological year, heading into Aries season, it's the perfect time to start thinking about what it is that you want to call in for yourself. And as we set these intentions and call in these realities that we want to bring in, then we need to learn how to notice or even ask for the signs and synchronicities that can help to point us in the direction that will ultimately lead us to our manifestation. But first off, I'll just briefly recap from last week's episode, but I also want to dive deeper into talking about how to notice signs and synchronicities and how to decipher their meaning. Now, we all know how to notice a synchronicity, as a synchronicity is just a series of simultaneous events or occurrences that seem to appear to be significantly related. And these synchronistic experiences can leave us with a sense of curiosity, that really captures our attention. Now, many people can just write them off as being coincidences that just seem serendipitous or uncanny. And, we can really tend to write them off as just that without looking into what meaning these synchronicities might hold or what the universe may be trying to highlight and show you. So the very first step in deciphering the messages behind any repeating sign or synchronicity is to simply just acknowledge and accept them and not to write them off as a coincidence right away. Now, whenever I notice a repeating sign or something synchronistic that keeps coming up, I find it helpful to write them all down and make note of them, either in my journal or in my notes on my phone. Now, next I will ask myself, well, what does this feel like these things mean to me? I will ask myself, either in the moment, right as I've noticed the sign, or I'll ask later during a meditation or when I'm walking in nature, or just when I'm in a relaxed state of some sort, like before bed or when I first wake up in the morning. Then, after asking, I just wait for the very first thought or thing that comes into my head, and that's it. Now, I know, you may be thinking, well, hang on, Terry, it's really not that simple. How can you be sure it's the answer? How do you know that what you get is right? But I'm here to tell you guys and to let you know that it actually is, in fact, that simple. You see, not everything is as complicated as our overthinking ego mind can make things out to be. And just simply acknowledging that we have this ego part of our mind can actually be really helpful. We need to remind ourselves that we are not just the part of the mind that likes to overanalyze and worry all of the time. That there is also the intuitive part of the mind too, that we can choose to listen to instead. When we are having these thoughts or fear-based reactions, this is simply just a part of the primal ego mind that wants to protect us. This easy and important step of simply not writing them off right away can help you to open up to your intuition or your intuitive mind instead. And remember, if an action or anything is new and not yet a habit, then our ego part of our mind can warn us, oh no, this action is new and different and it makes me feel uncomfortable. I'm only safe and protected when I'm comfortable, so this can't be good or trustworthy. Our primal ego mind only wants to protect us and keep us safe. This is why doing anything new or forming any new habit can feel difficult, because that part of our mind is just trying to warn us that it doesn't feel comfortable and that it doesn't think that we are safe. So, anytime you feel like you don't have an intuition, or if you feel like you can't trust your intuition, then just remind yourself that it's just your primal ego mind kicking in, and then it just doesn't like being uncomfortable. So, it'll try to tell you this, or it'll try to tell you it's not right, or that you can't do this. And to just simply acknowledge that that part of our mind is just there to keep us safe, but that we can shift our power from that part of our mind and choose to tap into our intuitive mind and listen to that part of our mind instead. Now, for some people, it can be difficult for them to receive intuitive answers or to trust what they receive. And if this is the case for you, then it's just because you haven't got into the habit of trusting that part of your mind that receives intuitive knowings. Because here's the thing, we all have an intuition. We all have that part of our mind that we can tap into that receives gut knowings or receives instincts or intuition. Now, intuitive answers can show up in all sorts of ways. They may be inner knowings, where you just suddenly know the answer, or you may hear the answer or get visualizations of the answer. Or sometimes you can even get answers that show up in the form of a sign or synchronicity, like getting an answer from a random stranger one day, or in a book that comes to you, or a spam email with the exact message that you were supposed to hear. The point being, how your intuition works will be unique to you, and that we all have an intuition. It's just that we haven't gotten into the habit of using it as often as our ego mind. And the more you get into the habit of tuning into your intuitive mind over your ego mind, then the easier it will get to identify what your intuitive messages or feelings feel like for you. Now, I must say though, trusting our intuition does take a certain level of surrendering, of being vulnerable and surrendering to an answer or a knowing that feels like it's just totally made up. And for some people, it can be really hard to trust their intuition or to trust the answers that they get, as they may not be familiar with how their intuition feels like for them. Or they may be fearful that the answer or the knowing that they received might be wrong. But the absolute best advice that I can give to you in trusting is to not put so much pressure on yourself to trust. Instead, simply just assume. Yep, that's it. It's that simple. Whatever the first thought or knowing that comes to you actually is, then just assume that it's correct or that it is the right answer and just go with it. Now, let's just break this down a little bit further. I mean, think about it. Why not just assume that whatever intuitive answer you received is actually the correct answer? If you get a sign and wonder, is this a sign? Then just stop yourself. Stop questioning whether it's a sign or not, and just assume that it is, and just go with it. Or, when you're asking for the meaning of a sign, whatever the answer or whatever first thing that comes into your head is, then just assume that it's the answer and just go with it. Because here's the thing, no one has to know, right? No one is around you to judge you or to make you feel rejected in any way. You're not in any danger, or you're not going to get in any trouble. So what is the real threat that is triggering these fears or doubts that you might have about yourself or trusting your intuition? We always put so much pressure on ourselves, like, oh, I don't know, is this what this means? Or, the classic, well, I've just Googled what this sign means and this is what the internet tells me and it doesn't really resonate with me and it doesn't match what the answer I got, so it must be wrong. Who's done that before, right? I know I have. But you see, it is just our ego mind, again, that tells us, oh no, I may not be right, or tells us that we don't know, or that we don't have the capacity, or that we don't have the answer and is so worried about being wrong. But in reality or actuality, it actually doesn't matter if we're wrong or right. No one's judging us. No one is going to come down hard on us and say, that's not the right answer, or you've got it wrong, that's not a sign. So we need to just take a little bit of pressure off of ourselves and just assume that whatever answer or meaning or message that we got is correct. And then, if the answer calls for an action, then take action from that assumed knowing and see what magic can happen as a result. Now, I know that it can be hard to always remember this, but it's okay if you slip back into listening to your ego mind every now and again. But the more we get into the habit of just simply acknowledging or observing our ego mind, then the easier it gets over time. And now, I know that I talk about this a lot in this podcast series, but just simply acknowledging our ego mind's role really can help us to take the pressure off of us needing to be right. And it really is this pressure that we place on ourselves of needing to be right that can stop us from following through on our intuition. Even for me, even after all these years, I do to this day still question my signs, even when they're a reoccurring theme or even when they're really in my face and dramatic too. Now, I'm going to share this story with you guys as it really does highlight how I succumbed to my stubborn ego mind last year when it came to me hiding from some messages that my spirit guides had to share. And I wanted to share this with you guys to let you know that, even though, I've been doing this work for many, many years, I still fall into the trap of questioning and fearing and doubting, and that's completely normal. These stories that I share also serve as an example of the steps that I took to overcome my fears and my limiting beliefs, and how to transform them into taking inspired action. Okay, so you guys know that I have a couple of different spirit guides that I tune into. My new guide, Neo, came in last year, but there are others that have been helping to guide me over the last several years. Now, one of these guides was one of the first ones to show up about 8 years ago, and he came to me during a meditation once. Basically, I'd been meditating for many years as a way to manage my anxiety. But one day I was sitting by a river and meditating when I had this beautiful visual of a giant tree that was showered in light come to me. Then out popped this person or this being from the tree. He told me his name, Articus Ethius, that he was from the Pleiades, and that I needed to trust who I was becoming. Then in these visualizations I was having, he handed me an apple, and then just like that, he disappeared. Now, I came out of that meditation feeling kind of overwhelmed as I'd never actually experienced anything like that before that was so clear and so real. But anyways, over time and after many incredible and synchronistic events, I learnt that Atticus was here to help guide me and to share information with me. So anyways, over the years, his main symbol that he uses to get my attention is through the symbol of a tree. So last year, I was getting lots and lots of loving and amazing encouraging messages from him and my other guides, to share the information and knowledge that I had with others. But as you all know, I was being super stubborn and was really scared about sharing this side of me with the world, as I really didn't want people to think I was nuts or to reject me. So one day last year in summer, whilst I was in meditation, I was telling them how scared I was and that I didn't want to do this podcast or revisit any of this again because I was so afraid of being rejected. Anyhow, they told me that I needed to pay attention to these fears and that these fears have been creating my reality and have been holding me back, and that I needed to shift out of these fears and limiting beliefs around all of it in order for my soul to be on the path that it was intended for. Then, right after they said this, I was showered in this most beautiful, loving light energy that had me feeling absolutely amazing, and my whole body was vibrating with this loving energy. And after receiving those messages and feelings, I felt a bit overwhelmed as I never really saw myself in that way, I guess. And I had never really accepted the part of me that would have these wild experiences with spirit and the universe. I guess as a way to normalize all that I had experienced was just me shrugging off these experiences and not accepting that it was a part of my life, that's to be celebrated or seen as powerful. And so, as my feelings of overwhelmed were being triggered, I started falling into that old pattern of shrugging off everything and started to doubt the messages that I had received. I was questioning whether is this actually true or not? Like, maybe it's all just ridiculous and none of it's true. I was really in serious doubt. I was like, I don't know why they're saying all this stuff to me because it's just not right. I'm not it. Like, go bug someone else. Anyways, while I was, all that fear and that questioning had come in, I heard a loud crack of thunder outside, and it drew me out of my meditation immediately because I love thunderstorms. And yeah, I just got so excited and I ran outside. So I stood by the side of the house looking up at the storm, and yeah, I was looking up and I felt a tingling on the forehead at my third eye chakra. It got stronger and stronger, and then right at the top of my head at my crown chakra, it started tingling even more strongly than my third eye. And so I closed my eyes because it was incredible. I was like, oh gosh, this is really overwhelming. And all of a sudden I had a big, like this beautiful big visual of a tree trunk that was forming and coming out of the top of my head in my visualizations. And it was this beautiful tree that was stretching up and out into the sky. And the feeling in my head got stronger and stronger. So I opened my eyes and I looked straight up right away, almost as if to like see the tree. But yeah, I looked up into the sky, and just in that moment, as I looked straight up above me, a huge bolt of lightning formed right above my head and came down all the way down across the sky and hit a tree that was on the mountain that's in view of our house right in front of me. And it made a loud cracking noise, and the tree actually caught fire. And I stood there just absolutely stunned at what I just saw, and yeah, just watching this tree burn on fire. And it was crazy because I felt my entire body tingle from head to toe. And then all of a sudden, the words came through so loud and clear, and it was from my guides, I knew that, and it said, "Know your power, Terry." And I was so bewildered, what I was feeling and what I just saw, that it actually kind of took me a moment to register all that was going on. But then I kind of snapped out of it because I realized that, oh shit, there's a forest fire on the mountain right in front of me, and that I probably should call it in. So I ran inside and got my phone and called in the fire, called the fire department. And yeah, they were able to put out the fire because I heard all the sirens go, and then the fire was out. But after that, it just was such a dramatic event, and knew that Arcticus always had gotten my attention through the signs or symbols of the tree. And I for the next few days after that, I was like, oh gosh, did that even, was that a sign? Did that even really happen? But it's funny because as if all of that wasn't enough to get my attention, the week after, when we were camping, my husband and I were sitting out on a rock looking over the mountain views, and I was pondering over whether or not that experience that I'd had, the week before was actually a sign or not from Arcticus, and that maybe it was all just some dramatic coincidence. And that if so, maybe I didn't have to face my fears or accept that I'd been hiding from myself and my energetic gifts. But just as I was in my ego mind and trying to convince myself that I didn't have to face my fears, we heard a huge, loud cracking noise, and a tree that was right next to us in the woods ended up cracking and fell right before us. It completely freaked us out, and I remember we ran back to the campsite because we were like, I don't know what we were thinking. We thought that maybe it was a bear or something. I don't know, but we ran back to the campsite because we were really scared. And yeah, after that, I realized that I decided that I probably should stop doubting myself, and that I needed to stop doubting the signs that Arcticus was giving me, as all of these tree symbols really did have my attention now. And now there were a bunch of other signs that had to do with trees after that, but I just wanted to show you give you guys those examples, because I get a lot of things like that, and a lot of signs that are quite dramatic and in my face, because I do tend to doubt signs and I do tend to question things a lot. And now maybe it's the Aquarian part of me that is very analytical and logical and, likes to connect the dots. And even in human design, I have gate 63, which is the gate of doubt, where, I have that readiness to pay attention all the time and to question, what feels right or not. Spirit's always giving me the craziest and wildest things, and I'm like, I don't know about it. But I wanted to share that with you guys because, although my ego mind questioned the meaning of these events and if they were even signs, my very first thought or my very first intuitive knowing right away, was that my guides were really wanting me to snap out of this stubborn ego mind and to pay attention to what they in the universe was trying to tell me. And remember, the more that we put our attention and our power into our intuitive mind over our ego mind, then the more that our subconscious will read that power or recognize that power, and the more that our subconscious mind will continue to create a reality that matches or reflects where we're putting that power. So the more that I put my attention and focus and power into accepting and celebrating my energetic gifts and sharing them, then the more that I will receive a reality that reflects this. So I really want to encourage you guys to try it out for yourself and see what happens. And remember, start small. Any of our actions, any new habits that we form don't have to be anything big or grandiose. They can be small actions, something like taking an hour or two each week to do something relaxing for yourself if you keep getting synchronicities that tell you to slow down. You see, when we take small, inspired actions, this helps us to get into the habit of taking action and helps us when we need to perhaps take a bigger action later on. Okay, so now I'm going to share how to ask for signs and what actions we can unconsciously do that can affect whether or not a sign comes in. Okay, so sometimes signs and synchronicities can show up randomly when we haven't asked for any. And that's awesome, as, they're constantly happening all around us, trying to show us where we need to put our attention. But you can also ask for signs too, and getting into the habit of doing this is actually incredibly useful, especially when you're stuck on making a decision or taking an action. You can even ask for a sign or a message to come through if you need more clarity on what it is that will help your personal or spiritual development. The point being, we can ask for help and we can ask for signs and synchronicities from our guides and from the universe anytime about anything. Now, to do this, all you have to do is to set the intention by asking the universe for a clear and obvious sign. So if I'm ever, not 100% sure on a direction or a decision to make, or if I just want clarity on something, I'll just simply ask the universe, either to myself or out loud, whilst I'm out walking or in a meditation or even journaling. And I'll ask, should I really do this? Or am I going in the right direction with this? Please send me an obvious sign. Or this is also a good one, and I'll either journal this or, say it out loud or to myself. And I'll ask, if this is in my highest good and in the highest good of others, then please send me a clear and obvious sign. Next, I will then hold the belief and know that the sign will come. And then I'll just completely detach from that outcome or completely surrender to the knowing or the belief that the sign will come and that it'll come at the most perfect and divine time. And then I just go out about my day or my week and, as usual. And that's it. As the sign or signs will always show up, and even sometimes when you least expect it. So even when I was agonizing over whether to do this podcast or not, this is exactly what I did when I needed some signs on whether it was something I should do. So you all know that, I received the download from my spirit guides about doing this podcast and that I was in absolute terrible denial. And my ego just wasn't accepting the answer as I was terribly fearful at the prospect of bearing my soul about this part of myself that I tended to hide from people. One day, whilst in meditation, I decided to ask the universe if starting this podcast was something that was in my highest good and whether it was something in the highest good for all, and to give me a sign if this is really actually something I should take seriously. So I set that intention and asked the question and got up from my meditation, and I was in the middle of making myself a coffee when I got an email on my phone. So I checked it and it was my weekly astrology report, and it read how 2020 marked the ending of a chapter for me. And it was the beginning or the start of a new one, and one that would shape my life for the next 30 years. I read that and I thought, geez, no pressure. Anyways, it went on to read that my career in particular will be shifting and that I'll be diving deeper into my spiritual side, and that I also will be realizing the power in my voice and to start using my voice to lead and share with others. I read that and I thought, okay, surely this isn't a sign so early. But just as I read that, I also got a notification that popped up on my screen from the app, The Pattern. The little pop-up notice read, "You might find that unusual things happen to you despite your efforts to stick to the ordinary road. You have the urge to blend in and to be normal and not stand out so much. You may find that frustration and pain can come to you when you resist being your authentic self, or if you attempt to act normal, as you act normal in fear of being judged by others. But you're meant to be different, and it's natural for you to have exciting experiences and live a unique life. If you're not following this energy, life will intervene by bringing radical changes to you, and you're being guided to embrace other parts of yourself that you may be hiding." So I read this and I just thought, oh God, that's 2 instant messages that I just received. And I thought again, well, no, surely these aren't signs. Like, they're just coincidences. So I disregarded them and went to sit down and do some tax work and turned on my computer. Now, when my computer was loading, it ended up getting stuck on this screen, or this pop-up from Microsoft. And it was a message that read, I'd never seen it before in the 7 years that I'd owned my computer, but it read, "Do more with your voice." And I saw it and I gasped at that message and I was like, oh gosh, what? But I just noted it, still brushed it aside, but I noted it and I was like, okay, maybe these are signs. But yeah, brushed it aside ultimately because I really did have so much resistance around doing this podcast. I just didn't want these signs to be real. So as my computer was stuck on this pop-up message while it was loading, I decided to distract myself by jumping onto Facebook. Now, the very first post that came up on my Facebook feed was from a friend that has an awesome apothecary line called Wild Jasmine, which, FYI, really awesome natural products. Anyhow, she'd made a custom lip balm set as a giveaway post for a podcast. And the message on the balm read, "Be savvy and boss up." Now, after seeing that post, I just stopped. And I decided to finally acknowledge these 4 signs that I just received, all under, 5 minutes. And I decided that maybe these signs were actually the signs that I just asked for. And that maybe I really did need to boss up and get over my fear and doubts about the signs that I was receiving. So in that moment, I knew that I had to surrender to the vulnerability that I felt, and that maybe I had to stop hiding and accept that I did have to use my voice more. So I decided to grab my tarot deck and I asked, all right, universe, I'm opening up to the notion of perhaps I need to start this podcast. Please tell me what I need to know if I decide to go ahead with this. And so I shuffled the cards and pulled out the Ace of Wands. And now the Ace of Wands didn't just come out once or twice, it came out 4 times in a row. Now, if you're unfamiliar with tarot and the meaning of the Ace of Wands, here's a short description of what the message read. This card encourages you to follow your heart, that you feel a strong pull towards a new project or a path, but are questioning whether it will work. This card gives you the gentle nudge to pursue this path and to follow your passion. If you've been looking for a sign about whether this is the right project, then the Ace of Wands is a clear yes. And that yes is in capitals, by the way. And I read that and I was like, oh, well, heck. All right, universe, I get it. You want me to look at this podcast idea. Fine. And so basically from there, I knew that these were all signs, these 5 signs that came all in a row in all in less than 5 minutes, they were all nudging me to look further into this fear or doubt that I had that was holding me back from starting this podcast, and that was holding me back from owning this side of me that has these energetic gifts and experiences. The thing is, you guys, when you ask for a clear or obvious sign, you will get it. And as you can tell from that story, they can come in all sorts of ways and at very synchronistic timing too. Sometimes the signs can even be super obvious, that you almost assume that it can't be a sign. I did it just the other day when we were driving in the car. I was in the middle of asking for an obvious sign about something. I can't remember. And when I'd asked for the sign and we pulled up at the lights and stopped next to this house that had a literal sign hanging on the side of the house that said, if you've been waiting for a sign, then this is it. But after you notice a few of the signs and synchronicities, and if you're still not sure if they are a sign or not, then you can also try asking for a specific sign in regards to your query. For example, you can say, all right, universe, if it's in my highest good to do this, then please send me a red beetle in the next 48 hours. And you want it to be pretty different and not something that would usually show up in your everyday life. And now this week, I decided to ask for a very specific sign so that I could share it with you guys. And I wanted to see what would show up. And it's funny because I asked it on, I think last Sunday or Monday. And then I completely forgot about it, that when it showed up, I actually didn't notice it right away. Anyways, it came through 5 days later. So I'd asked for, okay, universe, if I'm supposed to use a specific example for this podcast, then I want a blue shoe to show up because I don't have any blue shoes. I don't know anyone that has any blue shoes. And it's just not something that I really see in my life usually. Anyways, yeah, it was about 4 or 5 days later and I was on Pinterest and I was looking at linen fabric. I was looking at all these different linen designs and my phone screen had frozen like on the app and it wouldn't move. And now it took me a moment to actually realize that the screen had actually frozen on an image of this hideous blue high heel shoes with all these spikes all over it. Which was really unusual because I was searching for images of linen, linen fabric. And so I laughed as, when I asked for the sign, my mind assumed that it would be a physical shoe that I would find or see and not an ugly baby blue high heel shoe with spikes on it on Pinterest. Anyways, that's just an example. I was like, okay, there we go. I totally forgot that I'd asked for it. I was like getting all annoyed at my phone, like, oh, why won't this screen move? Why won't this ugly blue shoe go away? Then I was like, oh, I asked for this sign. It also doesn't matter why you're asking for a sign or what situation that you're in. It will come to you and it'll show up in lots of unexpected ways that, may be totally out of left field. Even in the most unlikely of situations, they can come through. I remember last fall when my husband and our friend were out camping in the mountains. And I kind of still was in my head about starting this podcast and everything. And yeah, I just didn't really know if it was something I really wanted to do or if I could even do it because I just didn't know anyone that was doing something like this, that ran a podcast or did anything like this. And didn't think that everyday people like me started podcasts or even if I had anything interesting or substantial to even say. So anyways, I dared myself to ask for a sign and I asked if it's really in mine and the world's best interest to start this podcast, then I want to meet someone who does something like this. Give me a sign. And immediately after, I thought, well, how stupid am I? Why am I asking for a sign when I'm in the middle of nowhere where there's absolutely no other people for hundreds of miles around? I'm not near any technology, nor is there any cell service or Wi-Fi. So I kind of laughed at myself for asking a sign then and disregarded it and honestly just forgot all about it. Then later on that night by the fire, we were chatting about catching fish and I'd made a comment and said something along the lines of fishing. Anyways, my buddy, who is an avid fisher, turned around and said, oh, that's the name of my YouTube channel, And I looked at him puzzled because he's one of my good mates and I thought, well, what the heck is he on about talking about his YouTube channel? He's not a YouTuber. He doesn't YouTube. And so I said this, but he told us that, actually, he'd started a YouTube channel and had been running it for a whole year and just hadn't told anyone. And we were so shocked and surprised as it was so unassuming for him to have his own channel and put himself out there like that. But we were also so incredibly stoked for him as he was sharing his passion and sharing with others something that he's really, really good at. And then I laughed as I realized I actually had just received my sign that I'd asked for. Meeting an everyday person who puts themselves out there on a platform all for the sake of sharing their passion. And I was laughing too because it was the last place on earth that I ever thought a sign like that would come through. Now, the next important thing that I wanted to share with you all is the energetics around the law of detachment and how this law or this universal energy can affect whether or not your sign will come in or not when you ask for one. Now, I've mentioned before about detaching or letting go of the outcome when it comes to manifesting what you want. But it's this same law, the law of detachment, or this same energy that applies to manifesting absolutely everything in this world too, including when we're asking for a sign. The law of detachment says that the way to acquire anything in the universe is to relinquish our attachment to it. Now, this doesn't mean we give up the intention to create our desire. We just simply give up our attachment to the outcome. So, when you set the intention of asking for a sign, it's important then to completely surrender to the trust and the knowing and the belief that your sign will come in. Think about it. If you're constantly observing or looking for the signs and that confirmation, then this is you not detaching from the outcome. This action of constantly looking for the sign and waiting for it to show up is actually telling your subconscious that you don't have the sign and that you need it and that you don't trust that it will come. So your subconscious reads this searching as you not trusting or believing that it will come. Otherwise, if you did, then why would you need to look for it? Therefore, your power is actually in the belief that you don't have it, that you don't trust that it will come, therefore you're looking for it. Then your subconscious will manifest that reality as a result because that's where you're putting the most amount of power or attention to. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with asking for a sign or for confirmation. You just have to make sure that you're not constantly seeking or looking for this sign in order for it to come in. Now, the other thing that can impact whether or not a sign comes in or not is to note that it is also equally important to maintain the balance of how much you are asking for signs. Sometimes we need to learn the lesson of trusting that we have had enough confirmation, of knowing that we've had enough validation and that now it's just simply time to act on or move forward from the confirmations of the signs that you've been receiving. Sometimes people can get stuck or even hooked on the magic or the fun feeling of the confirmation or validation that the sign brings. And now I completely understand, as it is fun and magical, asking for signs and getting them is super fun and can feel really comforting and fulfilling. It sets off a rush of endorphins and gives us a sense of, a reminder that we really are connected to an energy that is bigger and beyond us. But sometimes, some people will just stop there and not follow through on the actions that these signs can be indicating for us to take. Some people can just use this feel-good rush as a way to feel connected to the universe or as a way to feel good about themselves. That high of getting a confirming message feels really great and is really reassuring, but remember, those signs and synchronicities are there to get your attention and to help nudge you to take action on whatever it is that you need to be looking at. And so ultimately, there comes a point in time where we need to follow through in action on these confirming messages in order to really get a taste for what real magic we can create in our lives. We also don't want to fall into the pattern of constantly relying on the universe to validate ourselves or as a way of feeling that connection to the universe, but then not following through. Because if we become dependent on constant validation, no matter where this external validation is coming from, then this disempowers us and stops us from taking inspired action. It doesn't matter where this external validation comes from either, whether it's from our peers or our parents or partners, even from the media or even from our spirit guides or the universe. It's so incredibly important to develop that self-worth and that self-power. If we're constantly relying on others or even the universe for constant validation, then this stops us from becoming the person that we need to be in order to attract the changes that we desire in our lives. Remember that in order for us to call in or to sustain the reality that we desire, then we need to energetically match the vibration or the frequency of that reality. And the way for us to energetically be who we need to be is to learn to develop our self-worth and our self-power, to learn to give that validation that we think we might need to ourselves, and to learn that we actually have all of the answers and everything we need within us, and to learn to listen to our higher self and that our higher self knows the path. And once we fully surrender to trusting and listening to our higher self, well, then we can take inspired actions from this place. And once you decide to take action on what these signs or synchronicities are showing you, then what you'll find is that more magic and more ease will flow into your life as a result. Now, to finish off today's episode, there is one last thing that I do want to note, and that is whenever a sign does finally come in, then make sure to remember to take a moment to sit in the joy and have gratitude for receiving this sign. As sometimes we can take them for granted and can forget to bask in a little bit of joy when we receive them. This action of feeling and having gratitude actually helps you to raise your vibration. It helps to keep you in the present, in the now, and it also helps to keep you magnetized so that more signs and synchronicities and more manifestations can come to you. So there you guys have it. I'm super excited for you guys to go out and ask for some signs and synchronicities from the universe. And I'm curious to know what kind of stories and signs that you'll get. So do me a favor and tag me on Instagram at @myeverydayalchemy in your stories or, on your IG posts, and let me know what you've been getting. Or you can also sign up for my weekly email and let me know what kind of signs that you've been receiving. And I'll leave those links in the show notes, links to my Instagram and links to my website where you can sign up for my newsletter. And of course, if you found today's episode helpful or interesting in any ways, then please make sure to share with friends or family or work colleagues, anyone who might find this information useful or helpful. I so appreciate you guys listening in and being on this journey with me. Have a great week, everyone. Well, that's it for today, guys. And if you like today's episode, please like and follow us on our socials. Share this podcast with friends, and why not leave this podcast a review? Oh, and hang out an extra minute if you want some high vibe laughs. Oh my gosh, you guys. I just Googled some jokes. I typed in funny jokes about signs because I thought it would be really funny if there was a joke about signs that would be really fitting for this episode. Anyways, I went onto images and there's all of these roadside signs that have the most funniest jokes. So they're funny to me. I'm just going to read out a couple of them. Hold on. Oh, this one's good. Crushing pop cans is soda pressing. Soda pressing? This one. Eat more donuts. It's the original whole food. Oh no, I love a vegetable joke. In search of fresh vegetable puns. Let us know.